Welcome to this webinar about server-side tracking, but really a little bit wider probably about data quality and why data quality matters so much today. Whether or not you're at a disadvantage if you're not server-side tracking today, I think it's an open question. Depends on a few things, but we'll address it. But we hope that you come away from this having a better understanding of what you can do today to improve the quality of the data that you're collecting, analyzing, and sending to the ad platforms to optimize your spend. That's sort of in a nutshell what we're going to be talking about today. Quick introduction of ourselves. Alex, would you like to introduce yourself first?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Alex. I've been working in the digital analytics space since 2018. My main enjoyment comes from being able to communicate data effectively through storytelling and data viz. Yeah, so that's me. Over to you, Jules.
And I've been around for a bit longer. I've sort of been in digital probably for 20 years now. I've worked in SEO for quite a while. That was sort of where it all started for me. The CRO services, conversion optimization was really sort of something I really enjoyed, but it always drew me back to the data. So probably spent most of my career in web analytics, and probably the last 12 of that at Fresh Egg. My sort of main interest in the whole thing is sort of identifying the business challenges and connecting them with, well, by looking at the data and finding solutions for business problems. So I sort of, yeah, I come from the business side of things when it comes to this. So what can you expect from today? First of all, we want to make sure that you understand the benefits of server-side tracking and whether or not that is something that you should be looking into. But then as we started putting this webinar together, we realized that this is actually about the much more important and larger context of what the impact of poor data collection is on the efficiency of your ad spend. Return on ad spend and investment and your data analysis, all of those are impacted by data quality, and server side sort of was one of those puzzle pieces. There are two others that we will touch on today, which are the role of cookie banners. This is the sort of first touch point and hurdle to data quality as users come in. And then also we've got on the other end of the sort of the linear journey of users through your site, we've got the data that you send on to ad platforms like Google Ads, Meta, LinkedIn, TikTok, Snap, whatever you might be using. You're sending data to all of those, conversion data that those platforms algorithms use to optimize your budget. So it's really important that data is as useful and clean as possible as well. So yes, I think before we get started, we'd love you to answer a little poll question for us. If I can find how to set it up. Hang on a second. Oh dear. Here we are. I've got it. While I look for that also, if you've got questions as we go along, please do pop them into the chat, and we will we'll answer them as we go along. Apologies, I'm struggling a little bit to find this. I've minimized this. Here we go. I'm going to have to skip this one because I can't find the poll that I created earlier. Sorry about this. This is upsetting. Here we go. Right, please let me know if you can see this. Well, you can let me know by answering the questions. The question is, what is your biggest challenge with web analytics data today? I can see a few answers coming in. Whew, thank you. Very much appreciated. We've got answers in there like data lost due to ad blockers, attribution issues, compliance. I can see that that's not the biggest issue. So this is really useful for us because it tells us which parts of the content today we lean into a bit more. Right, great. Thank you for doing that. Let's crack on with this. I can actually share the results as well. You should be able to see the results now of this. So we can see that data lost due to ad blockers and sort of attribution, especially cross-platform attribution, are the two top answers, followed by limited insights from non-consented users. We've got something for you there. Compliance, not the biggest thing, but there is change in that space, which Alex will talk about. So yeah, this is really useful. Thanks, guys. Right, back to our slides. Your marketing algorithms and AI tools require clean data. So you're all aware of this. We're all sort of exploring the various AI tools that are popping up to help us become more efficient at our day-to-day jobs. We want we sort of in this space. We hope that you embrace AI to help you make things better and faster and etc. But obviously there is big risk because we all know that AIs can get things wrong. We've all seen ChatGPT hallucinate, and all usually comes down to is the quality of the data that goes in. So with more and more parts of our day-to-day jobs being driven by large language models or automation AI of some shape or form, the quality of the data that we put in becomes even more important than it's ever been. So here are the three, you can see the three areas we want to talk about, and I've lined them up in this linear fashion because I think, as I mentioned before, your cookie banner has got the ability to severely impact the quantity and quality of the data that you collect. So this is sort of the first touch point. Then we've got the main thing we wanted to talk to you about today is a browser side versus server side tracking and the impact that may have. And then last but not least, we want to talk about sending quality data to your ad platforms. But also recognizing users with cookies, etc., and what best practice there really looks like. Over to you, Alex.
Yep. So consent banners, best practice and why it matters. I think George just summed that up quite nicely. But a poor CMP integration can lose you up to 60% of your data. So CMP standing for Cookie Management Platform, OneTrust, Cookie Yes, Cookie Bot, those kinds of things. So this number obviously can vary depending on a few things. So, you might have already had exception rules in place on your tags before consent mode deadline was implemented, in which case you might see a much lower drop in data visibility. On the other hand, I've seen it much higher, around the 80% mark. This is due to some reasons such as showing the banner in locations where it wasn't necessarily required, but also making the banner really small and easy to avoid entirely. So it's not just technical setups that can impact this. So think tags firing before consent when you're trying to use basic consent mode, or another common one could be the cookie banner that pops up repeatedly as you go through a site. I'm sure we've all come across that situation at some point, but that can also be quite damaging. But there's also UX considerations, so overwhelming design, too many choices, banners that are unresponsive and just make you want to leave. So yeah, there are lots of factors that can create a poor CMP integration. And the reason that this is important is because bigger picture, this is another step in the sort of the shifts towards user choices around data privacy becoming more of a priority. So yeah, like I said, big picture, the context of that is the Digital Marketing Act put the pressure on the biggest companies, so Google, Amazon, Apple, to meet the data privacy requirements. For us, in the context of Google, that's been passed down in the form of the consent mode V2 deadline in March last year. And it's important because it isn't just for the sake of it. They've, over the course of last year, I think the ICO have looked into the top 200 largest sites in the UK and pulled up 134 of them for being non-compliant, not meeting the standards there. This year, that's going to be the top 1,000 biggest sites in the UK. So there might be some people working at those companies that are watching this now that this could apply to. So yeah, that's why it's important. And then, yeah, I wanted to just spend some time just quickly touch on the two types of the consent mode integrations. So again, this might be known, but as Jules said, this is a really important first step and it has knock-on effects further down the line. So we want to make sure we get this right and this is clear, so it's all being packaged up in sort of this discussion. So you've got basic consent mode and you've got advanced consent mode. So strictly respect the user consent choice. With basic consent mode, only fire GA tags when analytics storage is granted and advertising for when ad storage is granted. Therefore, you're only going to be collecting and looking at data for users who have consented to analytics cookies being set on their browser. On the other hand, you've got advanced consent mode. And again, this strictly respects user consent choice. The main difference is how it handles data before someone is given consent. So it will collect anonymous pings for users. And this, these are anonymous. This is stuff like page path, browser, timestamp, device info. That all gets aggregated and sent to Google and can be used to help modeling and build out that picture of the proportion of traffic that you've lost visibility over. Yeah, and there are different reasons. So for choosing the one that's right for you is also important, which is why I've got it here. I think basic consent mode, we would typically recommend advanced, but there might be cases where you would prefer basic because it is the most, max privacy assurance. No data is sent before consent. So this can suit highly risk averse or legal and compliance teams. Or maybe you have really high consent rates as well. So yeah, a few different reasons. Otherwise, advanced consent mode is the way to go.
Cool. There's also additional sort of benefits here. So once you start collecting these non-consented user pings, and that is really everything the user does on your website, except for the ability for you to combine those by session ID or user ID. We've started pushing that data into BigQuery and starting building dashboards with this, which allows us to understand a little bit better what consent means and how it differs. So we find things like users who are who have a higher propensity to buy from you or engage with your service are much more likely to actually consent. We find that consent opt-in differs by campaign and channel. We find that it can massively differ by market, wherever you might be finding your target audiences. So really what we've learned from looking at non-consented user data is that you can almost you can see it like a trust signal, really. And when I start thinking about how I personally engage with cookie banners without thinking about it, and obviously I'm biased because I work in the industry, but my behavior has changed from always clicking deny or always clicking accept at first. now I'm a little bit more considerate with whom I give consent to put cookies onto my browser, recognize me as a returning user, because I know that there are benefits to me when the websites that I trust and that I visit recognize me as a returning user. So the data shows us that's not just me, but other people are doing that as well. And we thought this was really quite exciting because it actually gives you data points for measuring trust and maybe the impact of sort of brand and trust campaigns. So that was a really cool sort of byproduct of the advanced consent mode as we rolled it out across most of the sort of accounts that we work on. Couple of points I think worth pointing out from a banner design and implementation best practice point of view. I think first of all, if you haven't already got this all locked and loaded, so to speak, then make sure you choose a consent management platform that integrates with Google. You can find a list on Google provides a list if you search for it that tells you which platforms they have integrations with. Pick one of those if you're ever in the market again. One thing we've learned is that there is great value in creating geospecific banners because not every market that you might be operating in falls under the strict sort of privacy legislation that we have with GDPR and some of the American states like California. So if you're allowed to collect more data, and this is not so much about data collection, this is about cookies, right? If the local market allows you to put cookies on people's browsers to recognize them as returning users, then do it because there is a benefit to you. We strongly recommend testing banners, wording, color, CTAs, etc., testing them across markets and also cultural differences. I think we know that there are wins in there, and we very rarely see people really using this functionality. On some of the CMPs, you've got A/B testing functionality baked in. Some of them, it's an extra paid feature. Yeah, making subtle changes and trying to optimize these banners for opt-in rates is worth doing. And first thing that starts with really is making sure that something you can all do today is making sure that the user has to interact with your banner before they can use the website. I still see banners that sort of sit at the bottom, are half invisible, and allow the user to still interact with the site. In Europe, that is considered non-consent, and therefore you won't really be getting any much useful information. Some of you will be thinking now, I've got no idea what consent mode I've got in place and whether or not this is compliant. This is where Alex found a little plugin.
Yeah, so best practice typically is to go through Google Tag Manager, Tag Assistant, and preview your site, look at the consent states. But that's not always possible. You might not have access to GTM. There might be another team responsible for it. There might just be blockers in place. So I was looking for an extension and found this one, which is called Consent Mode Inspector. And I've just given 3 examples really of what this could look like for a site that has no consent mode in place, a site that's got basic setup, and one that's got advanced. So generally speaking, I've got red highlights around everything. So the 2 on the right for basic and advanced, the key difference here is that the payload for advanced consent mode is G100. And you don't necessarily need to know specifically what all of this means. You can obviously go away and research it. But the reason that they're all denied by default, but the reason there's a payload is because there is some data that's sent off to Google before a user has interacted with the banner in advanced consent mode. So you could use this as a way to just double check what you've got on your site. You might see some different things. You might uncover that is unknown for some of these signals when it should be defined. So it can help you uncover things. That just reveals it from the network and puts it into a much easier to look at and digestible format. And then there's also the GCD code, which is again another consent data for consent mode 2. Yeah, which you can see here. So that's an example of what that looks like.
So of the 3 things we want to talk to you about today, this was the first one. Optimizing data collection at the first touch point of the user, the cookie banner. Like I mentioned earlier, if you've got any questions about this, please pop them in the chat, and we'll have a look when we get to the end. Let's crack on to make sure that we've got some time at the end for questions. Next section, we're talking about server-side tracking and what moving your tags from the user's browser into a container on the server side does, with the benefits that it brings, but also the challenges and what's involved in actually doing this. So back to you, Alex.
Yeah, so another nice sort of stat here is that moving your tracking to server side can show you up to 30% more traffic and conversions. It's reported now that around 31% of all internet users worldwide use an ad blocker. And also, so that could be an extension ad blocker, that can be a browser itself, like Brave or DuckDuckGo. All of these things could be in play there. But it's also beyond desktop, it can be on mobile and tablets as well. It also varies depending on sector. So yeah, your target audience is demographic as well. If you're working somewhere that targets gamers, the proportion of gamers that use ad blockers is somewhere closer to around 80%. So it's much higher. And I think also being a gamer, you could be going to university, so this can carry across into different types of sectors as well. But that's a general sort of stat.
So what is this actually, and what are we doing? So server-side tracking is not new. It's been around for quite a while. The functionality has been around for quite a while, and sort of technical marketeers have been recommending this route for quite a while. And when I say quite a while, I'm talking quite a few years actually. This has been around for. But then more recently, we saw this come up again in our industry as a sort of more hotly discussed topic, because data quality has just become so much more important, and because we are experiencing data loss and data quality loss sort of almost at every turn. All of this is driven by optimizing, or by our desire to optimize digital marketing budgets and spend. We're spending more and more money, and the quality, or what we get in return from digital investment, is degrading. You're probably all experiencing this. Cost per click is only going one way, and that is across all industries, to the point that really quite often we find that our clients find themselves priced out of some of their big channels, like Google AdWords. In the past, really, we could all crank up traffic quite cheaply, really, by just putting more budget into our paid channels. We could drive more traffic to the website if we needed more conversions, and that would have a direct result. But these days, that has sort of changed. Digital traffic is no longer cheap. It's also no longer reliable. There are so many different channels where our audiences are doing various different things. Not all of them work in the same way. So understanding what channel to target the user in, at what part of the customer journey, has become really important over the last I would say 5 years maybe, or more. And what's happening with data now is that our ability to recognize that user across those journeys is severely diminished. So this is why the conversation about server-side tracking has come up again, because we're now looking at every element of or every stage of these journeys and go, what can we do over here to make things better? So one of the reasons we also ended up in this browser client-side data collection situation is because it was easy. Putting tracking into the browser, the user's browser, was quite straightforward. We can do this through Google Tag Manager. We can collect signals on what the user is doing from the browser. But in doing so, gave users the ability to opt out of that or to manipulate that information. So, benefits of doing this client side were clearly that it was easy to set up, and that also meant that we could do this ourselves as marketeers. We didn't need the developers' help. But the issues we've already spoken about. Things can be blocked, data can be manipulated before it's being sent. This can slow down your website. So tags in Google Tag Manager load asynchronously, which means they load alongside the content of the website loading. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't have any impact. I've frequently worked with Google Tag Manager containers with, I don't know, 500 tags in there. There are some GA tags, pretty straightforward. There are some marketing tags in there, all different marketing tags from a whole host of different types of platforms. You can have your cookie banner functionality driven through Google Tag Manager. You can have live chat and callback features driven through there. You can even have a custom HTML and JavaScript tags in there that might drive some of the functionality of your website. I've seen pretty much everything. And as you can imagine, that will start slowing things down as the browser loads, the pages load, especially for users that might be on a slightly slower connection, like 2 bars of 4G somewhere in the countryside. Things start to get slow. So the speed of our websites is a really important signal for search engines. And we all spend a lot of time and effort building websites that are fast. Well, inevitably, the finger is eventually going to point back at us as the owners of the Google Tag Manager implementation, saying, your Tag Manager is slowing our website down. So if that's one of the things that you struggle with, this could be one of the major benefits for you. Cookie lifetimes. So moving things, tracking server side, we can set cookies that last longer than the 24 hours that Apple, for example, gives us before it erases everything and we forget a user again. And then also with browser side tracking, we've got very limited control over what data is being shared, and this is the privacy concern that this addresses. So we're putting all these trackers on our website, which are not the ones that we are in full control of, but ad trackers. We've got a LinkedIn page view and a LinkedIn conversion tag, maybe 5 LinkedIn conversion tags. We've got the same for Meta and for Pinterest and for all of the other platforms, Microsoft, Bing, obviously. We don't really know what information these tags collect and send. We trust that they are regulated in a way that ensures that they only send the information or collect the information they're supposed to. But then also we've all seen enough sort of court cases where the big tech companies have been accused of not really playing strictly to the rules. So by moving things server side, we gain a whole load of control over these things. So the way that this works is you still have a browser side GTM container, but this now sends the data to a server side GTM container where you have full control over everything. You control what is being sent where, which triggers are sending what. You can make sure that that the hits that are going to your ad platforms only contain the things that you want them to contain. Yeah, let's talk in a little bit more detail over some of those through some of those features. So data accuracy, client side prone to ad blockers, ITP. That's Apple's intelligent tracking prevention that doesn't block tracking, but it deletes user identifiers, cookies, after 24 hours. Why does that matter? So if a user comes to your website, then they are a new user. If they return a couple of days later and we have a cookie that recognizes this person as a returning user, then we know that they're a returning user and we might want to treat them differently. So personalization comes into play, A/B testing comes into play here. We need to be able to recognize somebody when they return. Personally, I want to be recognized as a returning user when I go to my news websites, because I want them to know which articles I've read. I want them to know the sort of things that I enjoy reading about, etc. So being able to identify users is important. We can, for example, remember somebody has bought something and automatically exclude them from my lead gen campaign, right? I don't need to spend money on people that have just recently purchased or that have already signed up. All of this information is being captured in a cookie. Then obviously we have the ad blockers, which might block Google Tag Manager entirely. What that means is not only do our marketing pixels not fire, but our tracking doesn't fire. Our Google Analytics tracking doesn't fire. We could also have functionality in the Google Tag Manager container, like your cookie banner and a chat functionality. All of these things can be blocked. So number of reasons there why data accuracy and quality would benefit from this. Privacy and compliance, just like I already spoke about a second ago, we have control over what data is being sent where. So in a highly compliant environment like finance, for example, this is one of the bigger benefits because it provides more control. Worth saying that that is also the more technical and advanced end of server-side implementations, and things are technical and pretty complicated down that end. Site performance, I've mentioned, tag slowing down page speed, and how by offloading that processing of all of those tags onto the server, we can actually create a more positive experience for users, but also for search engines, really important part there. How do we measure these? I think we typically look at Google Lighthouse, what they're called, core web vitals data that you get in Google Tag Manager. For a few of the websites we work with, we have set this up to push the core web vital values into GA, and what then that allows you to do is to track these over time by page. And see what the impact of such changes has on page load times. Cookie lifetimes can be extended by setting your own cookies, first-party cookies in the browser. So that vastly improves your ability to attribute sales to the correct marketing channel, which effectively will improve your return on ad spend. Tracking security, so if things happen in the browser, they can be manipulated. This is, maybe touches on PII. Can PII be extracted, etc. So really, there are benefits from moving the server side because we have more control. And then marketing APIs. This is a whole nother subject that we'll talk about in a minute. Server-side tracking allows direct integration with marketing APIs, conversion APIs like Facebook, LinkedIn, etc., which we've dedicated a whole sort of section through, section 2. So, Alex, maybe you want to summarize some of these.
Yeah, I wanted to reiterate some of the benefits there with a bit more context on the screen. Some of the most sort of important things that I think come as benefits. So, like Jules said, controlling the data what gets sent to the vendors. So when you load third-party JavaScript, it can be tracking exactly what you intended. But the key point is that it could be doing more than that, collecting other cookies, fingerprinting, sending that data off to other servers where you can't do anything about it. Server side gives you the option and the opportunity to stop that and at least take actions to minimize the likelihood of that happening, which is not something that you can really do with browser client side. Similarly, reducing PII leaks, because you intercept this before it gets sent off, you have the opportunity to review and clean it. It's not automatic. It doesn't just happen if you move to server side. You have to actively set this up. But the key point on this is that you have the opportunity to do it. And if you are capturing email addresses and sending them off to Meta, it's too late. It's gone. But you have the chance to get in between that before it happens. Minimize ad blocker impact. So, like we said, with the browser extensions and different browsers that will naturally block third parties. So by serving Google Analytics from a first party domain, so your domain, rather than Google Analytics, it's a thing that's sort of letting it through. There's less chance that it's going to get blocked. And that's one of the main benefits. Also, this links to a feature that was recently released in maybe the past 2-3 weeks from Google. It was called First Party Mode. Then they renamed it to Google Tag Gateway because Google like to change the name of their products. But yeah, what that essentially does is it doesn't replace server side. It's trying to replicate and make this step a lot easier. So in super simple terms, if you use Cloudflare and you use GTM, then you can set this up and it will make the Google Analytics requests appear as first party requests. So yeah, it essentially serves those requests from your domain rather than Google Analytics. So this helps you on that journey towards migrating to server side. And this just makes it a bit easier. And then, yeah, the other one was page performance, which Jules touched on. So GTM can load asynchronously, but it's what's in the content of GTM that can slow things down. So I have actually seen a GTM container at 97% capacity before. You might not have even seen the fact you can have percentages on GTM containers, but when you get that high, they appear. Wouldn't recommend it, but it's a prime example that always stays in my mind when I think of this.
Sorry, I jumped you there on the slide a little bit.
That's all right. Yeah, so I suppose we just wanted to have a really brief overview of what's involved in setting up server-side tracking. So kind of condensed it into a generalized 5 steps. So the first one is to deploy your server-side container. So that would be in Google Tag Manager, and then to provision a server for it. You then can map your default server because you're given one that's still third party, but you can map that to your custom domain, or now you could use Google Tag Gateway as well. Start sending your data to the server-side container, so you could forward it from your client side to server-side before it gets sent off. Essentially, you then test everything, and then probably test again. And that's it in a nutshell. So how do you do this? So you can use Google Cloud Run. It can be quite a daunting process, I think, to sort of start with server side. So you can either use Google Cloud Run. This is probably the main method. It's a bit more technical. So if you have analysts, engineers, and devs on hand that might already be using GCP, this could be a good option. There are guides out there that help make this clearer. It will give you full control of the back end, but it is a more technical implementation. On the other hand, you could use products like Stape. They just essentially do more of the heavy lifting and the technical implementation, package it up in a user interface, and that therefore makes it much easier than Google Cloud Platform. So, yeah.
This one's my slide. We put this one in because we thought we might need to answer that question. Are you at a disadvantage if you're not server-side tracking/tagging? I think the answer is if your competitors are, probably, right? All of these things that we talk about lead back to reducing the cost of your clicks, improving the return on your ad spend. So if your competitors are paying less money for their clicks in the same space where both of you are competing for those clicks and those users, then probably. Faster web pages provide better experiences for users and favor search engines. We've talked about this. They may have 20% more data than you, not just a better understanding of how much traffic they're getting, but also 20% more conversions, which means they can send 20% more conversion signals to the algorithms that optimize their outcomes. So that could very well be an advantage. And they could also be more compliant and have much stricter hold of the data, the personal data that is being sent out to these ad platforms, which in some industries can be absolutely critical. So we've talked about banners, we've talked about server-side tagging, leaves one big subject, which is enhanced conversions and conversion APIs, or CAPI, as you may have heard this being referred to. So what is this? It's called enhanced conversions with Google Ads and Meta, Snap, LinkedIn, etc. refer to it as CAPI or conversion APIs. And ultimately what this does is it sends user information, encrypted user information, to those platforms to help them identify the user. When I say the user, I don't mean the actual individual person. It just helps them identify that this person has been here before, has done this before, can therefore be put into a segment and treated differently from a brand new user. So I have to say, when this first sort of started, it was a little bit uncomfortable. I'm not going to lie. I'm still sometimes a little bit uncomfortable with this because I spent the last 10 years trying to avoid collecting PII, or personally identifiable information. But now my clients are asking me to capture personal information like email address and name when somebody submits a form on their website, like a newsletter sign up, and encrypt that, one-way encrypt it, so you can't unencrypt it, and send it in with the conversion hit to Google Ads or Facebook. That's what conversion APIs do, and that's what Google enhanced conversions are. If you have a Google AdWords sort of contact at Google that help you spend as much money as you can on the platform, then I'm pretty sure they would have talked to you about enhanced conversions and user provided data before. So this is what that is. We are sending user identifiers to ad platforms to help them optimize our ad spend. And this matters because we're marketing to people, and being recognized as somebody who has done something, been somewhere, often also provides a better user experience. I personally remember many brands for all the wrong reasons, which was that they aggressively marketed to me after I had already purchased their thing. I find this highly irritating. Again, obviously, I'm a little bit biased because I work in the industry, but there is great opportunity to really destroy any sort of brand loyalty or positive experience a user has had by not switching gear once they have done one of these things on our website that we want to do. So this is why I do think this is worth considering. Big benefit here is that this also works across domains and browsers, etc. Because the ad platforms can pattern match those encrypted user identifiers and then treat those users differently. How does this work? So done it many times for enhanced conversions for Google. What we do is we'll get the developers to make that user information available in the data layer on successful form submission. It's captured and encrypted via Tag Manager. SHA-235, I think, is the encryption method. It's a one-way encryption method, which obviously is critical to all of this being legal and compliant. And Google then uses that hashed user identifier to identify the individual and optimize our campaign activity for it. For CAPI, or the conversion APIs that we get from all these other platforms, the implementation is pretty much the same. However, there is a much easier way of doing this. So Alex already mentioned Stape. Stape is a brilliant service that have made this space accessible for marketeers, that non-technical people, which I include myself into. What you can do through Stape is you can buy their service very cheaply, and within 3 clicks you can set up the conversion API for Facebook, for example. They'll charge you about $10 a month for this, which isn't a huge amount of money at all in the context of a full-blown, full-scale server-side migration of your tracking. So have a look at stape.io. They've got one-click implementations for most of the ad platforms that you would want to be working with. There's also a Google Tag Manager server-side migration option that they offer. We recommend those guys. We use those guys, unless obviously we have clients who very specifically want to have full control and move everything onto a server that they already own. Is this okay? I hear you think. Is it okay to send user identifiers to ad platforms? Well, your implementation's got to be GDPR compliant, which means that you need to get the consent from the user. You need to hash it securely, so it can't be unencrypted, whatever the correct term might be. And we need to be telling the user what we do with their information. So the ad platforms, as you might imagine, argue that one-way encryption anonymizes it and therefore everything is compliant. I think we always make sure that our client's legal team is happy with what we're doing. We provide them with all the information and documentation that they need to be aware of, before we set anything up. But we have set this up for quite a few of our clients, and we do know that out there in the market, your competitors are probably doing it too. So ultimately, this is about reducing the cost of our digital ad spend and remaining competitive in a space that is becoming that is almost pricing, well, that is definitely pricing lots of businesses out of the market. So yes, you need to work out for yourself if this is okay for you to do. The legal framework exists, and the information is available to get this signed off internally. So as a little summary, what have we talked about? The 3 stages of data quality optimization that we find ourselves involved with on a daily basis these days are advanced consent mode and cookie banners, making sure that everything is as good as it can be at data collection point. The non-consented pings that we collect, they will go straight into BigQuery if you've got your daily BigQuery exports set up, and they will appear there line by line, unaggregated, just like every other hit. The only difference being that they haven't got the session ID and the user ID. So you know how many page views happened. You know how many conversions happened and everything else, but you can't group them into a session or a user because you're missing that identifier. But everything else you've got. We've talked about server-side tracking. It's a really complex subject, and there are many people out there much better than us at explaining how to actually do it. Seymour Harver and Analytics Mania are the two sort of sources that we mainly use when we need to find out how to do something complicated and technical. And then the conversion APIs. If your ad agency who look after your PPC spend haven't spoken to you about enhanced conversions or CAPI, then it's time you raise that subject with them. Reminder of what the prize behind all of this, or for doing this, is, or what's the return? Well, there's lots of additional data to be had, and there are gains, serious gains on return on ad spend to be had for implementing these things. So while we all spend a lot of time and money on making sure that our websites work hard for us in converting users, we should also make sure that we put an equal amount of effort into making sure that the data that we collect is as good as it can be, because quality is no longer an absolute given. Make it somebody's job is, I think, the recommendation I'll give you here. Typically, this is not owned by anyone, and it's not typically part of an agency-client relationship. That ownership, it sort of falls in between the cracks a little bit, and nobody really quite feels responsible for this. But there is huge benefits. There are huge benefits in focusing on this and trying to get it right. And then I think it's also worth pointing out that this is the status quo right now. By the time we've shared this deck with you next week, things may have slightly changed. So keep an ear to the ground. I find LinkedIn brilliant with keeping me up to date on things that are changing. Like, the format of the Google cookie the other day that broke a whole bunch of third-party tool implementations, because suddenly people could no longer read the session ID out of the cookie, and that broke things like call tracking, data reporting. Things change all the time. Keep an ear to the ground. Got a few minutes if we hurry up. I've got one more poll for us. I'd love to know if this in any way, shape, or form has changed your mind or motivated you to explore any of these three areas. I'd very much appreciate if you could give me a quick click, and I shall share the results with you in a minute. I can see there are quite a few people interested in server-side tracking. Not a surprise, because that was the title of the talk today, and we apologize for sort of baiting and switching you a little bit, but when we were preparing for this, it didn't feel right to talk about one without mentioning the impact of the other two, because all of these things for us are very closely connected, and all of these three subjects are things we talk about on a regular basis. So you can see the results here. Right. Where else are we? So that was us. That was us. Talking you through what we think are the sort of most pressing issues in our sort of digital data space at the moment, and what you can do about them. I've put my email address on there, and I invite you to email me if you've got any sort of follow-up questions, or if we don't get to your questions in the next remaining sort of 5 minutes. I saw one here from Julian earlier about collecting non-consented data in BigQuery. I tried to touch on that a minute ago. So this will collect automatically through your BigQuery export, and we highly recommend everybody set up their Google Analytics 4 to BigQuery export. It's free. It's the only way to extract raw data from GA4. Google BigQuery is basically just a data warehouse. It's free to set up. It's very, very, very cheap to use for data storage. And it's pretty easy to manage cost once you start using the data in there. So even if you feel right now that sounds a little bit technical and you don't need your data in BigQuery, the day will come where you will. And you can't import historic data. It only works on the daily raw export. You can, but it will be aggregated. So if you want raw data hit by hit, day by day, set that export up now, because even if it's, it might be in a year's time that you realize actually to up your game to the next sort of level, you need to start merging data sources in a data warehouse, like web traffic and CRM data and email data and Google Search Console. All of these you can merge together and build much more powerful reporting. So yeah, activate that. Sorry, BigQuery rant.
There's one on how do you know how much traffic you're losing to ad blockers and browser restrictions. So I feel like there's not really a single source of truth. You're never going to get a solid answer, but you can try a few different things to kind of build up that picture. So I think with your CMP, you can sometimes look at the reports and the dashboards in there, see how many people have seen the cookie banner, who have ignored it, those kinds of things. If you've got back-end conversions, so sales or sign-ups, you can compare that with what you've got in GA4 and see what the drop-off is there. I think you could also look at sort of the server-side logs of people just coming to your site generally, and compare that to what you've got in GA4. So yeah, a few different ideas to explore with that one. I don't know if you've got any others, Jules.
Yeah, so Phil Pierce is on here. He has built a tool that checks your consent mode setup. It's called consentmodemonitor.com. It's in the Q&A. I think everyone can see that. That's a that's a tool that's probably also worth using, and it doesn't require you to install a browser add-in. I'd sort of it had dropped off my mind. Phil, apologies. Phil knows his stuff, and he says his tool scans your entire container rather than just one page, so it's probably a bit more powerful than the plugin that we suggested. Phil, do we think that Google is going to blend GTM and server-side GTM into one platform in the future? I think it's an interesting thought experiment. The technical hurdle is immense, but if we can see that they provide automation in the same way that Stape has helped us so massively over the last year or so. If they can make this easy for everyone, then yes, this might be Google's way to try and get around some of these sort of closing in walls of restrictions and technology. Melanie, yes, we'll be sharing the deck, absolutely. Gideon is asking about other providers than Stape, like adding Well and Elevar that offer similar sort of services for one-click or few-click integration. I don't know. I haven't used those. I've only used Stape, and I think what they do is brilliant. There was a question from someone saying, is our consent banner non-compliant if it doesn't require consent before users start interacting with the site? No, doesn't quite work like that. You can collect. So typically when we come to a new website, that's the first thing we look out for. We look out for events being sent in the console before the user has clicked accept. But if you've got advanced consent mode set up, then actually you will be sending data to GA before the user interacts with the banner. The difference being that this time those events are not going to contain a session ID or a user ID until the user accepts. And if the user accepts, you can stitch those sessions together into one session with all of its interactions. If the user denies, then you continue to not collect a session ID or user ID, and they will stay split. We hope this was useful. Like I said, please do feel free to send me emails if you've got any follow-up questions. Phil, except you with your difficult technical ones. Yeah, thanks for joining today. We've very much enjoyed this, and hope to see you on the next one.